Hey, what's up guys? Guardian here, coming guys with a deck profile on my ThingSaver Dragon deck for V Premium. So we had the V Clan collection come out last month in November. It took a little bit of time to get stuff sorted out for the decks, and also, to be honest, I've been playing this deck quite a bit recently. But this is by far my most favorite deck at the minute in the V series. I remember when ThingSaver got revealed. I was very if and ah about it. I wasn't too sure how it was going to play out, but after experimenting with the deck and all of the different options that we have in Royal Paladin to mix with Thingsaver Dragon, this deck is just so well in terms of how it plays. It's really, really fun to play. I think the main thing about it that I like is just like the micromanagement side of it with the resources and trying to plan out your turn so that not only you can get the Thingsaver attack off, but also you can do some other cool extensions with stuff like the Jewel Knights and also have some stuff to do with Blaster Blade as well, which is always cool. So I thought I'd show off the Legion art there with the Thingsaver and Blaster Blade Seeker, and we'll go straight into the deck profile. So to start off with the grade 3s, we of course have the main thing himself, which is Thingsaver Dragon, Seeker Thingsaver Dragon. So Seekers are in V Premium technically. But Thingsaber's really nice. It's obviously got the Force marker, and when it's placed on Van, you can counterblast to search your deck for the one Blaster Blade Seeker, call it a rear guard, shuffle your deck, and until the end of the turn, that unit called gets 10,000 power for each of your Force markers. So on the first grade 3 turn, your Blaster Blade will be 20k on his own, which is pretty nice. It can at least get over defensive when your opponent is still at grade 2. But the second skill is the main thing about it that I like, which is at the end of the battle that it attacked, if you did not ride this turn, so that is a very different terminology that we haven't really heard before, but it's basically a mechanism for them to basically balance Thingsaver in comparison to its old version, which is on the playmat here. But at the end of the battle, they did not ride this turn. You can Soul Blast 3, choose 4 cards from your drop zone, return them to the deck, and then search your deck for the one Seeker Thingsaver Dragon, ride it as stand, and then shuffle your deck. So yeah, you're basically doing what Thingsaver did in the past, but it's now technically a once per turn now, since you can only do it when you haven't ridden. Now, this does make it so that your first grade 3 turn, it's not particularly too great, because the only thing that you're getting really is the call from the first skill. But this is fine though, because we can use other engines to basically make the grade 3 turn a little bit better than it would be just on his own, basically. So yeah, so that's the premise around Thingsaver, is that we want to make sure that we have the 3 soul that we can soul blast for his skill on the following turn after the first grade 3 turn. So that's how Thingsaver works. So moving on, we have technically a backup grade 3 for the deck. The times where we go first, sometimes we might end up riding into Ashley, which is actually a good fallback option. So if you do not see your Thingsaver, Ashley is actually not too bad going first, since of course you can get 2 extra attacks off by calling 2 grade 2 or less Jewel Knights from your deck. So you can actually get 5 attacks off in the turn by doing 1, 2, 3, and then getting 2 more calls with Ashley's skill, since she's on the Vanguard circle. But outside of that, when you are riding the Thingsaver Dragon, preferably, Ashley's a pretty good extender for extending your attacks basically on that grade 3 turn. So it'll give you something to work towards essentially when you do go for the grade 3 turn. Now you may be thinking, well, the Soul Blast 2 is a little bit costly, don't you think? Because Thingsaver does require 3 soul. Not necessarily, because we do play a lot of outlets in the deck that actually soul charges, and of course the grade 2 Jewel Knight has an ability to soul charge after it's attacked by shuffling 2 normal units back into the deck. So that's pretty cool there. So soul management is actually not too of a pain in this deck. So the Soul Blast 2 for this is not too detrimental to the Thingsaver strategy. But also bear in mind that the unit that's placed on Ashley's circle as well, when you do place something on top of her, you can counterblast 1 to give it a critical. Now, the cool thing in this deck is that there aren't particularly too many things in this deck that counterblast, which means more times than often, you will find opportunity to use that critical skill as an extra layer of pressure for your opponent to worry about. So that's really cool. So yeah, there has been games though where I do end up riding into the Ashley, depending on the circumstance. And, you know, Ashley still works pretty well. You know, she is also a really good Vanguard to be using. So yeah. But of course, the main focus is Thingsaver, so ride that if you do see it. And of course, Things Server will be calling out your Blaster Blade Seeker. So for the grade 2s, we of course have 4 copies of this. So Blaster Blade works a little bit differently than it did in the past. So with this one, when it's placed on Vanguard, you can pay the cost of discarding a card from your hand, choose one of your opponent's front row rear guards and retire it, and then you choose one of your Vanguards with Seeker in its card name, and then it gets grid. And if its grid is less than or equal to your opponent's Vanguard, the unit will basically get an additional critical. So its original crit will become 2, which is really nice. So when you go into that second Thing Server on that attack turn, you can actually make that go critical if you're looking for that extra pressure push to basically close out the game, basically. So that's really cool. And also the rearguard skill for Blaster Blade is at the end of the battle that it attacked, if you did not ride this turn, you can pay the cost of putting them to the bottom of the deck and then draw a card, basically. So it's a great way to put them back into the deck so that when you go into your Thing Server Dragon, you have Blaster Blades that you can call out with the on-ride skill, which is something you need to bear in mind. Like, having an open counterblast available after the Thing Server attack is very important because calling that Blaster Blade out from the deck is basically a form of attack extension. So yeah, do bear that in mind. And also, he will be getting that power from Thing Server, so he doesn't have to worry too much about defensives. One of the cool things I like, though, about the Retire skill is that it discards a card from your hand. And this actually synergizes perfectly with the Jewel Knight engine because you'll be Soul Blasting 2 with the Ashley sometimes to get the grade 1 and the grade 2 out of your soul. And then you can also discard cards with Blaster Blade so that when you go into your Lily, she can actually shuffle normal units back into your deck so that you can get a soul charge and some power. So you can actually recycle your resources fairly well in here. And like I said, you do generate soul charge through other cards in the deck, so soul isn't particularly too much of a worry when it comes to those types of skills. But yeah, the skills could really synergize really well with each other, which is what I like most about this deck. So yeah, nice to have Blaster Blade back in his Seeker form. So we're playing 4 copies of him. So we just went over a little bit there, but we of course playing the 4 copies of Lily for the Jewel Knight engine. So Lily's really cool just because of the fact that she's actually one of your preferred ride targets, funnily enough. Because on Vanguard, when your other unit's placed on her circle, the unit will gain 10,000 power, which means the turn that you ride your Thing Server, this will actually go to 23, which means you can actually put that marker onto a rearguard circle instead, which is actually very useful for when you're going into your Ashley, so that your Ashley can then attack for 23,000 and then call something else to that marker to then have an additional 10k boost. So if you call like another Lily to the field and then give it that power skill, that's 25k there. So that's really good in terms of attack extensions. But yeah, of course, her main skill, which I like her for, is that when she attacks, you put 2 normal units from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck, in any order, then you soul charge 1, and then this unit gets 5,000 power. So very good, because that extra 5k does push you over thresholds to get over defensives and, you know, particular magic numbers. But of course, the main important thing there is the soul charge. The soul charge comes up pretty much all the time because you pretty much need that soul for things like your Thing Server, obviously, but also Ashley as well, since she also does require 2 Soul Blast. And depending on what you want to do for that turn, will depend on basically how many times you're soul charging throughout the game. But we do have other resources which do that as well, which we'll get to shortly. So 4 copies of Lily. Then we have 3 copies of an oldie but goodie, which is Liverot. So Liverot, of course, I think most of us know what this does by now. It's used in most Royal Paladin lists. But I'm only playing 3 of this. So it's Vanguard when players from hand. You counterblast 1 to search your deck for a grade 2 card, call it to an open rearguard circle, then shuffle your deck. And then if no cards are facing beyond damage zone, you may play Soul Blast 1 instead of a counterblast. So that's pretty good. Now I'm only playing 3 of this just because I wanted to make room for some other stuff in the deck for utility purposes. But yeah, the Liverot comes in handy quite a fair bit. Just because you can call stuff out like the Lily, for example, to get extra attacks on the field. But also having access to the Lily to then get that soul charge is also very handy as well when it comes to planning your turn out and just, you know, generating your resources basically for that turn so that you can do what you want to. Also, the fact that it's placed from hand as well, that can be a hindrance in some decks. But there's actually a piece in this deck that works very well with Liverot, which we'll get to in a bit. So yeah, I decided to go for the 3 Liverot, just to have a bit of toolbox in the deck. And the last grade 2 that I decided to go for was the 2 copies of Die Connect Dragon. So Die Connect Dragon was actually a change I did recently because I was testing out Loading Angel, but Loading Angel couldn't really because it's at the end of the turn and it's a counterblast, it can sometimes be a little bit awkward to set up. But honestly, I feel like hand advantage in this deck was fairly decent. I didn't feel like I was struggling too much with my hand size, but Die Connect Dragon is definitely very nice to have. Basically, just because it's a better Pongle in a way, because it's when it's placed, if you have another unit in the same column as him, you soul charge one, and then if you soul charge the trigger, he gets 10,000 power till end of turn. So yeah, it's another on place for a soul charge. You do need to make sure you got a unit in that column though, which isn't too much to ask for, just because we do have a good plethora of grade 1s that we can have in the back row to support the Die Connect Dragon. So that actually works pretty well. And like I said, the Live Rock can actually search out the Die Connect Dragon as well. So if you're in a die situation, you could always call the Live Rot and the Die Connect in the same column if you're that desperate in need of the soul charge, basically. But having that on-demand and toolbox ability to search out the soul charge with Die Connect does come in handy sometimes when setting up the plays. So that is it for the grade 2. So moving on over to grade 1s, we of course have our 4 copies of Cecilius, which is our grade 3 searcher. Very, very important for this deck, and just a really good tool in general, just because not only do we want our Thingsaver Dragon, but we also want Ashley as well, because she's just a really good extender for attacks. So yeah, Cecilia's got multiple purposes there, with 2 different targets that you can get, which are both good. But also being a 13k booster at times can also be pretty nice. You know, there will be times where we can pretty much turn off our counterblast down, which you need to be careful about, just because we don't really have a solid form of counter charge in this build of the deck. So do be careful there. But if you feel like you can get through that turn without the need of counterblast the next turn, you can do that, because like I said, counterblast is few and far between with cards in this deck, and the main resources that you're mainly using in this deck is that Soul Blast. The counterblast only really comes up with something like Thingsaver and a couple of other cards like Liverot, but besides from that, most stuff doesn't cost CB in this deck that are like super vital. So yeah, Cecilius, 4 copies of those to get our important grade 3s. And then we have the 4 copies of the Jewel Knight grade 1, which is Morvidus. So the really cool thing I like with this card is that it is a counterblast, but I only really use this as an optional, a very situational counterblast, depending on how much soul I need, because it is another form of soul charge. But you can also give a unit 5k power, that's one of your Jewel Knights. And this is pretty cool because you can actually turn herself into a 13k booster, and then depending on how you're lining your attacks up during the turn, you can basically create a column, say like after an Ashley attack or after Thingsaver calls a Blaster Blade out, to basically make a really big column that can get over a good defensive number, magical number wise. But yeah, so the soul charge one's really nice, and the 5k power comes in handy for magic numbers. But it's got a nice utility skill, which is when your other unit is placed on this unit circle on Vanaria, you draw a card. So this is actually a really good ride target. So if we don't end up riding the Cecilius, we can also just ride the Morvidus instead to get that additional draw when we ride the grade 2, which is really, really nice because it allows us to dig through the deck and draw into some more pieces, hopefully. So 4 copies of those. And then the final grade 1 of the deck, and honestly, this card is what opens the deck up to some really cool plays. So this card came out in set 3, I believe, if I remember, in the V series. But yeah, this is 4 copies of Knight of Exponentially Sword Lucius. So Lucius is really, really nice, and I'm really glad that they've reprinted this as a foil, because this card is heavenly in this deck. So on Rearguard, when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard is placed, you can pay the cost to put this unit into your soul, draw a card, and then call a card from your hand to the Rearguard circle. So the really cool thing there is that it has synergies with your Liverot, since Liverot can only be used from hand, but your Lucius can actually call this from the hand if it's there to use. But do keep in mind that you can only call to open Rearguard circles to Liverot. That is something to be wary of. But the main thing here with the Lucius is that because he pushes himself into the soul as well, he's another direct way of soul charging, which means you can set yourself up potentially for, say, another Ashley skill for Soul Blast 2, depending on how your turn's gone and how your soul charging has gone throughout the game. So yeah, extra attack extensions. The Lucius is insane. It's even more insane when you can set multiple of these up on the field, and the fact that he pushes himself into the soul to be then used as a resource for soul blasting is just, it's like butter, honestly. Like, it's one of the main things about this deck that I love is just the combo potential with all the different units is so cool. And yeah, I just love it, man. Like, Lucius is such a really nice combo piece for the deck. Definitely got to play four of them, in my opinion. Decided not to play the Grade 1 Augustus in here just because it's a Counterblast and a Soul Blast, which is pretty expensive, and it's okay in certain scenarios, but I kind of want to go for like a more consistent build with like more copies of the main pieces that I want in the deck, which is what I've shown. So yeah, so those are the grade ones. So very quickly, go through the grade zeros. We of course have our starter, which I decided to go for Glime because it's been a fair bit, I think, since I've used Glime as my starter. So yeah, I think the aesthetic of Glime kind of goes with the Thing Saber, I think. So he's a good boy. So put him to the side. Um, so next we have the triggers. We are playing, of course, a very standard build, really. We're playing the 8 crit with Loot and Floggle. Don't really need to go into those. We, of course, have our 4 draw PGs with the Assault. And then we have the one of the new things that we got from the V-Clan collection as well, which is the Heal Guardians. So I decided to go for these just because pandering damage in the early game can be quite good for Thing Saver, just because we're kind of a turn 4 deck, so we need to make sure that we can survive long enough to get to the second grade 3 turn, so that we can actually use Thing Saver and try win basically. So the Heal Guardians are a really nice reassurance to be able to pander the early game down a bit, so that we can reduce that pressure and hopefully last long enough to get to that stage of the game. But yeah, these are really cool additions to the game. Absolutely love them. So yeah, what's he called? Innocent Rare Dragon. So yeah, thankfully I was able to get playsets of each of them for my clans. So really happy about that. But yeah, that's basically it for the deck. So Thing Saver Dragon, he is back. Looks a bit different than his old version, but he does look really cool. And of course, he was made with the Legion artwork yet again with a Blaster Blade Seeker. Looks very nice. And yeah, I'm really happy with the deck. It plays really well, and even though it may not be top tier, I feel like the fun of the deck is mainly what I care about with this. And yeah, it's just really fun. I can't really say any more than that. And in terms of the marker, obviously, you're really going to go for Force 1 usually, just because with the things like the original crit becoming 2 and stuff like that, you can't really pander the crits too heavily. Ashley is a way of increasing crits sometimes, but yeah, Force 1's just better, just because that extra power can help carry you over into getting past defenses basically. Oh, and just so I can go over me markers a little bit, because it has been a few years, guys, so give me a break here. But we of course have the Quick Shield. I still need to get the Royal Paladin one of this. Still need to try find that. But yeah, we have here our Aichi Force 2. We've got Ganslot here for Force 2, and I actually got both the Thing Saver ones as well. I got 2 Thing Saver markers, so I can have one for Force 2 and one for Force 1, which is really cool. So yeah, then we got Messianic Lord Blaster there. We got Monarch Alfred. We have Blaster Blade, got this years ago, so yeah. We got the Aichi marker, which came from set 1, and then this is the set 3 Aichi marker. So yeah, just wanted to show those off a little bit, because it has been a fair while since they've been on the channel. But yeah, it's really nice to be able to use those again with a brand new Royal Paladin deck with Thing Saver Dragon. So guys, tell me guys what you think about the deck in the comment section below. Tell me guys your builds as well, any changes I might make, any recommendations. And I will have a deck log of the deck in the description below, so do check that out if you want just a more overview of the deck. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you guys in the next video. So this is Guardian 205, as always, signing out.